this is what you're up against. For most gang members, the outside world is chaotic and stressful. The outside world is not about when they're with the brethren. The outside world is coming out of prison and you've got to go back to your parents' house. The outside world is going into a dumpling shop for the first time. The outside world is going to Asda and picking up shopping for your girl. The outside world is being seen with your girl. The outside world is getting onto a bus. The outside world, recently you heard about Depsman. Well, I remember when Depsman, there was an event on at the Rep, and I ended up talking to Depsman's grandmother and his uncle. They're finding us murder victims. They're finding it unbearable. Their world is now chaotic and stressful. So it's not just the perpetrator, it's the victim. What happens when the person who got stabbed sees the person who stabbed them? They both start to stress. Impulsive actions. If you're autistic, if you suffer from autism, mild autism, if you haven't been diagnosed, but the psychological impact of incarceration can derail your desistance trajectory. It can really disrail it, because what happens is you're impulsive. You start, I know of one particular case, a guy witnessed his brethren getting shot, and he used to go and sleep on his grave every day. I know gang members who stand and look at a bridge and think, I wonder if I can kill myself. My daughter's cousin committed suicide. He did something wrong, he was going to do another 5 years, didn't want to do it, he just hung himself. And at the funeral, I made a lot of his friends come up and look in the coffin to see what it looks like when your neck's broken. Because I needed to find a way to put them off, because they felt that being bad was good. So I said, let me tell you where it ends up. So, impulsive actions. Family relationships. I guarantee, how many people here have got gang-related family members who can honestly say that they're welcomed back with open arms? It's not easy. High risk. High risk. And if you've never known anybody in a gang, you can always tell somebody who's never had one. Because they'll say, oh no, if it was me. Well, it's not you. Because if it is you, you know what it's like. They'll turn up unannounced. They'll walk into a room. Because a lot of them might have robbed from you. They might have stolen you. They might have slapped you up. And as workers, you're dealing with that. Unmet health needs. Teeth. Ears. When you're doing your work, you've got to think about the healthcare implications. I've just been doing some research on what we call the Black Rage Defence. The Black Rage Defence is in 1846. A young black guy, was beaten senseless in prison. He left prison and murdered 4 white people, and he was found not guilty on appeal, based on what we call urban psychosis. What we know is that urban reality has a psychological impact, and you can use it as a legal defence in the court. It's not used for our use, but I've got involved in court cases as an expert witness, and what you realise is unmet health, education, employment, housing. If you can't satisfy your basic hierarchy of needs, you're going to go back on a rampage. This is another one. Has anybody here had a family member who you find out they're coming on Friday and suddenly the police will have a big meeting? Because that's what happens in the community. When you know certain people's coming back, phone call, everybody gets on red alert. Because every one of them man who saw their cousin get shot is counting the days to when my man's coming out. They know. And what do? They don't wait for the guy to come out and do something. Well, they target his mum. They go to the mum's house, target the mum. What do you think happens when they target the mum? He ain't having it. So within 24 hours, he's recalled back to prison. And then finally up here, civic participation. Civic participation is the right to participate in society. But what happens is, gang members get excluded from civic participation because of their label and because of their experience. Which means if they can't participate civically, all you're doing is saying, well, you must have said it, yo, brethren, you can't go out, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't go there. So they're not participating and they feel restricted and then we go back. So there's only a couple more slides. My work now has moved away from criminal justice, and I frame a gang as what we call a social determinant of health. What I start to look at is how does money, power, resources create the conditions for gangs, and how do we measure that as a health inequality? So I don't see it as a criminal justice issue. I see it as a public health issue. Because criminal justice presupposes that laws, when they get broken, they shouldn't be broken. Well, if you're poor, you'll break the law. If you're oppressed, you'll break the law. If you're hungry, you'll thief. So if we're coming from that position, it affects our health. It's not, I say to people, violence is not good for your health. So I frame it as a health issue. So that's about social determinant of health. And what we do is look at a global... And that's why a lot of young Muslims are going to fight for Syria, because they're feeling completely rejected, and they feel more at home where they're going to face getting shot because they want to die for a cause. Whereas over here they think they're not. There's a futile existence. And how many people here, how many people have watched television on a Friday night with 220 channels, and it takes about 10 minutes, and what do? You go like that, and you go, oh, friggin' hell, man, there's nothing on TV. And then your partner comes in and said, do you want to go out somewhere? I don't want to go out, man. Flipping, see, we feel, what's the point? You know, they've took my money out of my account, my kids are doing my heading, my car's not working, I'm putting weight on, rare. We feel the futility. What happens when somebody really feels that? So we touch it on a small level. That's why having a job's important, because you feel useful. This is what I developed as a model of practice in my work. In a minute I'll talk about desistance. Desistance is just determination. So I look at what makes people stop offending. But I've realised there's a bit of a trick to it, really, because you have to prepare people. So I want to know, how do you prepare someone to stop offending? The cycle of change is what we use with sex offenders, drug and alcohol, where you motivate people to change. So my argument is, you prepare someone to stop offending, you motivate them to do so, you signpost them positively, like college or work or whatever, desistance, and it leads on to a crime-free life. So it's a very crude model. But let's show you what. There's 3 types of definition. Termination point of offending. So Birmingham New Street to London Euston. London Euston is the termination point of the train. Cessation means you just give it up. Lack of continued involvement, you find it boring. And normally this one is when you get too old. You're too old for it. Most gang members are between like 15 and 25, 30. Have you ever walked, it must have been to anybody here ever been to a funeral and you see your uncle, you remember the old bad man from back in the day? Got this flared shirt on and he's got the gold chains, he's drinking rum at the graveside. You know, and he used to be a big drug dealer back in the day, full of stories. But in reality it's just stories, because they don't have the energy anymore. So you realise, termination point of offending happens, you can see somebody get their head blown off and straight away you come out. You could loop. So there's lots of reasons people terminate it. Some people see it's because they're fed up. It's not working for them. And then a lack of continued involvement or investment. Just not worth it. That's where you come in. So that's the definition. But there's 3 types. Primary is in and out. Anytime you see a youth that comes up to you, you say, where was you? Oh, I've been working in London. No, he isn't. He's in Bridgeford. Been away for 6 months. Have you ever read that? Yo, Bridget, I haven't seen you for a couple of months. Been away. I'm working away. You know you're not working away. Why are you telling me you're working away? You're working away. Secondary, you're planning it for good. Now, one of the problems is with this definition, some people are out the game until they have a reason to go back. So we've begun to question whether people can abandon it for good. John McVicker, who was a famous armed robber, when they asked him the question, did you get rehabilitated in prison? He said, no, I just found something else to do. I don't believe people are rehabilitated, they just find something else to do. You cannot measure when you stop and how you stop. What you do is how useful are you doing something else. But the moment you take that away, for instance, a child. Classic example, you comes out, got a new child, he's looking after the child. I'm a father. And then the woman said, we're done. See, I have to say this, yeah, women have got ways of ending a relationship. Some women say, it's over. When a woman says that, there's room for negotiation. It's over. Just say that to me, say it's over. Well, you got the other one that I faced a few times. Done. Have you ever, even the way you say it, when a woman says that, she can speak as posh as she likes until she says, done. The whole hand comes in, we're done. Done, 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 see? And then her friend's with her and said, did you hear what she said? You're done. Done. What I'm dealing with is that to be done, when a woman said it's over, but when it comes to crime, gangs, you can't say that. Because the deep, entrenched experience, unless you can discharge it, lies dormant. And that's why you find youths who reinvent themselves through hip-hop, music, dance, sport. And if you take that away from them, they go back. So what we've got now, which is where you come in, tertiary means 3. The third wave of desistance is where you develop one's sense of belonging to family and community by reconnecting people to family and community, which reduces social disorganisation. Right now, everybody in this room, you are at the most important stage of enabling young people to feel useful. This primary, that's society, doesn't create the conditions for people to feel they belong. Why are we going to wait for our youths to get to 30? You can't go up to a youth and say, all right, give it up when you're 35. But here, tertiary desistance. So that's the 3 types. So, last couple of slides. Strengths-based approaches means that key to successful desistance with gang members is to locate the strengths and human resources they have. You don't focus on what they've done, what they may have done, it's not relevant. You focus on their strengths, what you can sing, what you can perform, what you got a sense of humour, what you can... But if you get too caught up in their offending behaviour, you're reinforcing the very same thing that the system did in the first place. When you meet a serious offender, it's very easy. I work with sex offenders, and I have to start with that. I work with people who've mutilated and killed 3-year-old children and had sex with them. But I still have to work on their strengths, not their weaknesses. I don't really like sex offenders. But what I've learnt is, I'm not there to judge. I'm there to change the way they behave. And your job is to turn that around. So, I'm saying, what we tend to look at is risk and needs. That's bad practice. That's what they did in youth service probation, risk assessments. That's not what desistance is about. Desistance starts with what do you bring to the process. That challenges you, because that forces you to look at what do you bring to the process. And then what we've got here, agency is the individual. And you enable the individual to discover things about themselves that they didn't know. I met a gang member in America who'd been shot in the neck, and he was paralysed, so he'd walk like this. And he never smiled. Never ever smiled. And they introduced him to me. And he wouldn't speak. He just wouldn't speak. And I must have said something stupid, because I clown around a lot. And he smiled for the first time. I saw his teeth. And I'm not going to lie, it was just the best set of teeth I ever seen. But what I said to him, brethren, how did you get your teeth like this? And he started to tell me how he keeps his teeth clean. He told me how I've never seen teeth like this. Yet he'd been shot, he sold drugs, perfect teeth. I said to him, brethren, and I saw him smile. And when he smiled, he had an impact on me. But he never actually believed he was worth anything, so nobody put value on something as simple as a smile. I worked with a guy about 2 years ago. They chopped his fingers off. They put his fingers down, chopped his fingers off, and he found the guy who did it and nailed his foot to the floor and cut his Achilles heel out. And for like 5 years, he killed 3 people. Couldn't smile. Same thing. I had him in a room. Brethren, what do you want? He goes, Martin, I go down to the chapel every day to pray to God. I can't find God. I said, when was the last time you smiled? He goes, 5 years. It took a week. I made him smile. That's all I could do. Well, that was all he needed to do. The fact he smiled, he made me a certificate, and I realised he could draw. When I found he could draw, he made me a certificate. So I realised he got skill. So although he killed 3 people and he was dangerous, but I was the first person that actually said, you've got a skill. Because in prison he just got beaten because he'd murdered 3 people. And he was dealing with the psychosis and flashbacks of having his fingers chopped off. So what we do is work with, not on. That means for you to work with people, you've got to look at yourself. Not just impose yourself on them. And I'm sure I'm not talking to no strangers here. And then I think this is the final. Oh yeah, this is what desistance does for you as practitioners. You help the individual navigate towards desistance. So it's a trajectory. You work with them towards it. Dialogue and negotiation, constantly talking, constantly negotiating. Collaboratively defined tasks, so you work together. Not as practitioner and, you know, I'm a practitioner, you're a gang member. You work, and in my work, I start as with two men, old man, young man, intergenerational. So it's two men working, not, I'm a criminologist, you're a gang member. Which means it's about the kind of, it's who you are, not what. What you are as a practitioner, who you are is this person that he's talking to. So that's the desistance framework. And I call it breaking free because after 30 odd years of practice, which I've now developed a training program for this, called the Be Wise program. Finally, I've discovered a framework of my own, which is completely new. And you will notice the biggest portion here is family community. Networking, signposting. I don't say anger management, fear and anxiety management. Motivating them to change. Generativity is finding new purpose. I'm working with a youth on the road at the moment. I'm going to be on a track. He's a grime artist, he's a gang member who's a grime artist, but I'm actually going to be performing on one of his tracks. That's a big step for him and it's a big step for me. But he's found new purpose because he's saying, Martin, I want to educate people, but I don't know how to do it. And then finally, for men, a rite of passage that produces positive masculine challenge. Craig is a very good example of that because with Craig's work, I've seen how Craig will challenge young people's masculinity by demonstrating as a big guy, he doesn't have to be all macho and tough. So again, for men and women, and specifically male practitioners, it's providing alternative ways to challenge young men without the hyper-masculine tendency. So by putting all of that together, what I've seen over the last 20, 30 years is people break free. And the reason I can say that is because of the work that I've done and where these people have ended up that I've worked with. So I think, let me just go back to that. So in a way, as I started out earlier on about why you're here, for me right now, as I'm exiting and I'm moving into new things, every bit of this is just common sense. It took me 35 years to discover I didn't need to do a PhD, because I did all of this before the PhD. All a PhD does means I can talk to politicians and sound clever in lectures. But what I realise is we've all been fooled into thinking that the only people that can do this type of work are professionals.
We'll talk.
It's not true.
We'll talk.
Because you're all part of the family and the community, you're all networked, you know about fear and anxiety, you can all motivate people to change, you can all help people acquire new purpose, and you know how to get young people to change their behaviour. It's not rocket science, but at a time when we want punishment and retribution, you can see that this gets me in trouble, because I'm saying this is holistic. This is about, when we get together, let's pray, let's hold hands, let's do drama, let's sit in silence. When guys come to my house, Craig, can you just answer this for me, please? When you normally come to my house in the early days, what would happen? Can you just tell people what would happen when you come to my house?
Notepad, paper, breakfast, and studying for a long time.
Craig will come to the house, this is the deal. Craig comes to the house, Craig didn't want to do a master's, didn't want to do it. I convinced him to do it, and Craig come up to me, in front of me, and said, Martin, you're going to mentor me. Mentored him, he comes to my house one day, and I'd normally do breakfast, but until we've done the work, he's not having no breakfast.